Good evening. My name is Garrett Bookout. For those of you who don't know me, that's probably just about most of you. I really do appreciate this opportunity to speak on your summer series. I'm very thankful for it. I wish I could be with you. I appreciate you making accommodations for me, and that I've had several in my home who have got the coronavirus, and so it's probably safer for you all that I don't leave. I've been feeling fine. As far as I know, I haven't been infected with the virus. And so I'm thankful to still participate in your summer series, even though I couldn't physically go and be with you. I want to go ahead and get into the topic that I've been asked to discuss, and that is the Son of God and Son of Man. I'll just go ahead and tell you kind of from the outset that I'm going to spend more time with that second phrase, Son of Man, and I'll tell you why. And it basically has to do with, I don't think we discuss it as much. Now, personally, I haven't. I think that if you typically ask people, what titles would you give Jesus, or does Scripture give Jesus? The three most common are Lord, Christ, Son of God. And Scripture talks often about those things. I can tell you throughout my ministry that I've preached many lessons about Jesus is Lord. I've preached many lessons as Jesus is Christ, and I've preached many lessons about Jesus being the Son of God. But as I reach back and I think in my mind, I don't know that I've ever titled a lesson, Jesus as the Son of Man. And so when I was given that title for this summer series, I was intrigued, and I really enjoyed the study. And so I've spent more time probably studying that, the Son of Man, and what all it means. And I don't think that I have a complete understanding of it, but I'm going to share with you some of the things that I have discovered that I've really enjoyed. We'll talk about both. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about Jesus as the Son of God, but we're just going to spend most of our time on that phrase, Jesus as the Son of Man, because I don't think that that's typically given as much discussion, and maybe it should be. Interesting. You might find that of all the things Jesus is called in the Bible, he's called Christ, he's called Lord, he's called the Son of God, and many other things. But what Jesus referred to himself the most as is Son of Man. He called himself Son of Man more than he called himself anything else. And so that fact alone tells us maybe we should focus on it. Maybe we should think about it. I don't in any way want to disparage the other titles. They are extremely important. And I have some thoughts about maybe why Jesus did that. Among them, I think that we live in a time where we just see men and then we know of a God. And so the fact that God came to earth is extremely important for us. And it's something to think about, that the man Jesus who walked this earth wasn't just any man, but he was in fact the Son of God. But Jesus talked more about being the Son of Man, and I was thinking about why that might be, and we'll get into the text here in just a moment. But he lived at a time where obviously he walked this earth. And when he walked this earth, he had to kind of separate himself from others. And so he talked not just about the fact that he was the Son of God, but that he, who was a man like everybody else, was different than the other men. And so he used the title Son of Man that I think has its origin back in the Old Testament. And so what I want to do in this study is I want to look at two passages, one from the Old Testament and then one from the New Testament. The first passage I want to look at is in Daniel chapter 7. What I want you to notice about this passage in Daniel chapter 7 is that it was a very important passage for the people of Jesus' day. Have you ever known of, what do you say, like a phrase in a movie that whether you've watched that movie or not, it just kind of permeates society? You know where certain quotes come from, whether you've seen the movie or not. I'll give you an example. I'm not really a Star Wars guy. And if there are any Star Wars people, I apologize for that. But I've never seen most of those movies. And as a matter of fact, if you were to ask me 2 years ago, I could say I've never seen any of them. And so I'm not really a Star Wars guy necessarily, but I've always, I think, known the phrase, Luke, I am your father. If you'd have told me that phrase 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I could have told you that's Star Wars. But I've never even seen the movie. But it's a phrase that's so important that you don't really have to have watched the movie to know where it comes from. Well, it's in that sense that I think Daniel 7 uses a phrase that just stuck out, and that phrase obviously is Son of Man. And so what I want to do is I want to briefly walk through with you Daniel chapter 7. We're not going to be able to talk about it in great detail, but I want to show you somewhat of what's going on in this chapter, because I think it'll help you as you move into the New Testament and when Jesus starts using that phrase. Okay, so in the book of Daniel, what you need to recognize is that Daniel is talking to people who were captives. That is, people who belonged to Israel, but their nation divided. The northern part of Israel went off into captivity in Assyria. Judah, the southern tribes, remained for a little while longer, but eventually Babylon took them as captives. Daniel was a captive. He didn't get to live in Israel. He wasn't in Jerusalem. He was in Babylon. And so as someone in Babylon, what happened often is they started to think a lot about kingdoms. Who rules this land? Like, if I'm going to say God's my king, but I'm living in a land where God's not my king, and the king is like just bad, and this king is immoral, and so many times there's these thoughts about, like, does God really reign? Or does God really rule? Does God really have authority over the kingdoms of this earth? And the book of Daniel is basically written to show these captives God's king. God's in authority. God rules. The book of Daniel is somewhat interesting, and you might or might not know this, but the Bible is written in three primary languages. It is written in the New Testament in Greek, the Old Testament primarily written in Hebrew, but there are splatterings kind of throughout the Old Testament in Aramaic. Daniel's interesting because it has quite a bit of Aramaic in it. And I say that to say this. There is an Aramaic word in the book of Daniel that keeps reoccurring, and it is sultan, which is interesting because I know that phrase because when I was a kid, I used to watch a movie, I'm assuming some of you have seen it as well, called Aladdin. And Aladdin ended up marrying a princess, Princess Jasmine, and she had a father who was king, but they didn't call him king. They called him Sultan. That's what this word is. It means he's a king. It means a right and authority to rule. Even in our society, we have, well, I guess not living now, but a while ago in our society, there was one named Babe Ruth, and they called him the Sultan of SWAT. Babe Ruth was a great home run hitter, and basically what they're saying is like he's the king of hitting a baseball. Okay, so that's the idea of this word, king. It's ruler, and they often wondered who is king, who is ruler, and Daniel is primarily about that. You have these kings of earth who had these exalted opinions of themselves, often even wanting to be worshipped by man, and Daniel's just writing, basically saying, no, we have a king who sits on a throne, who's over all the earth, who reigns over all the earth. And Daniel chapter 7 is primary in that discussion. Okay, so Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1 starts by saying, in the year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. Then he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. So when you're reading Daniel chapter 7, what you're reading is a dream that Daniel had when he was laying in bed. And it's going to be kind of a wild dream. And we're not going to be able to study it in great detail. There's a lot that I'm not going to cover. There's a lot, honestly, that I don't really even understand myself. But I want to highlight some points of it. What we're primarily going to see is that it's talking about, and later in Daniel 7, he gives kind of the interpretation of this dream. And it has a lot to do with kings. Okay? It says in chapter 7, verses 2 and 3, Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, And behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. As we read of this dream, these beasts are going to be wild. They're going to be like nothing you've seen. But they're supposed to be in your mind something terrifying. As a matter of fact, later on in Daniel chapter 7, we're not going to get to it, they're described as kings, as kingdoms, as these kind of kingdoms that were, in a sense, beasts, and that were mean and harsh and unloving and unkind and terrifying and trampled the people of God. And he describes these kings and these beasts in some detail. Verse 4 says, the first was like a lion and had wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a human, or like a man. A human mind was also given to it. And so the first beast was like a lion. You've seen a lion before, but you've probably never seen a lion that had wings and stood on its legs and thought like a man, right? And so as terrifying as a lion is, you give it a smarter mind, you give it wings to fly, give it the ability to move like a, and all of a sudden, you have an extremely terrifying beast. Certainly not one you would want to walk into as you're going down the street. But that's what it's meant to conjure in your mind, is something terrifying. And these kingdoms of men were terrifying. There are hard places to live if you were the people of God. But he describes a second beast. Verse 5 says, and behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear. And it was raised up on one side, 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. Thus they said to it, arise, devour much meat. And so of all the beasts, this one probably is the most familiar with something we've seen. It looks primarily like a bear. What's different about it is that it has ribs coming out of its mouth. And so it's already killed something. And these ribs are speaking to it, and they're saying, go do some more killing. Devour much meat. And so again, the second kingdom is not a friendly one. It's a murderous one. It's one that's looking to devour and to do harm. He describes a third beast in verse 6, saying, after this I kept looking, and behold, another one, like a leopard, which was on his back, 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So this third beast, again, there's similarity to it. It's like a leopard, but it also has wings, 4 wings. And it doesn't just have a head, it has 4 heads. And it is given dominion. There's our word. Power, the right, the authority to rule. It is a kingdom, and it's supposed to be, in your mind, a terrifying kingdom. One that would be hard to live in. One that oppresses the people of God. And so you have these 3 kings, all kind of like animals we've seen before, but there's some difference to them. Terrifying in their own right. But what he's going to move into in verse 7 is a 4th beast. And this beast is like nothing you've ever seen. There's really not even an animal description of it. It's just terrifying. Verse 7 through 8 says, after this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong. It had a large iron teeth, or it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So right from the beginning, we know that the other beasts were harmful to the people of God, but the 4th beast did the most. It killed off the remainder. Right? No animal is described. It's just terrifying. It's dreadful. It's extremely strong. It's just something that's supposed to conjure in your mind fear and terror. Not a kingdom you would want to live in. He says in verse number 8, while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among it. 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it, and behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and mouth uttering great boasts. So it had this little horn, knocked out 3 other ones, but this little horn had eyes like a man, but it kept boasting. It kept speaking of its greatness. It kept speaking of its power. It kept speaking of its dominion and its rule. It was a kingdom that was proud. It was a kingdom that was arrogant. And in the midst of all this, Daniel says, I kept looking until thrones were set up. I want you to notice the plural of that. Not a throne, but thrones were set up. And the Ancient of Days took his seat. So 2 thrones, and Yahweh, God, comes and sits on his throne. And the question lingers in our mind, who's going to occupy the next throne? Who's going to occupy that other throne beside God, beside Yahweh? It says his vesture, that is his clothing, was like white snow, and his hair, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. His wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before it. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were opened. And so this throne isn't a stationary throne. It's a throne that rides and moves, it seems, in the clouds. And it was 2 thrones, and it was in this almost chariot that had fire kind of flowing from it. And by God was thousands and thousands and myriads, probably of like these spiritual hosts and angels just attending to him and probably singing praises to him. And while all this is going on, it's like he goes on and there's still this horn that just keeps talking and keeps boasting. He says in verse 11, then I kept looking, because the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. And so while God is on his throne and this whole magnificent scene is taking place, what keeps drawing Daniel's attention is this little horn on this beast, this terrifying beast, that keeps drawing his attention. And he says, I kept looking until the beast was slain, and his body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. For as the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away. But an extension of life was granted to them in an appointed period of time, for an appointed period of time. And so he's seeing this vision, and here's 2 thrones. God, or Yahweh, takes one seat. And there's all these angelic hosts that are kind of attending to him. And then there's this beast that just keeps uttering these boasts like he's something. And then all of a sudden, that beast is slain, thrown into the fire. These other beasts, these other terrifying beasts, they just have their dominion taken away. They're nothing. Man looks at them and says, terrifying, dreadful, scary. But to God, they're nothing. He goes on. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man. Hold on to that. One like a son of man. That's going to be important in our study, obviously. He was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days. That is God. That is Yahweh. And he was presented before him. And to him, that is the Son of Man, to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion was an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So we've been seeing these kingdoms of men, and they're terrifying, and they're dreadful. But the Son of Man, and it looks like a man, comes like a human, and he is presented to God, and he sits in the throne beside God, and to him is given glory And to him is given dominion. There's that word. The right and the authority to rule. Like, you have all these kingdoms, and he just strips their power away and gives it to the Son of Man. A human. The son of a human. Is sitting in the throne beside God. That's an amazing thought. And it needs to be remembered in your mind as we move into our next text from Matthew chapter 26, verse 57 through 68. As we move to Matthew, what I want you to recognize is chapter 26 is the time in which Jesus is arrested. And Jesus is arrested, and after he's arrested, he's brought before several to kind of give a defense. And one of the people he's brought before is the high priest named Caiaphas. And we're going to read a section of scripture where Jesus is on trial, in a sense, for his life before Caiaphas, the high priest. Verse 57 says, "Those who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together." And so Jesus is brought before these Jewish rulers. Now, what you know about the Jewish rulers is this. They know Daniel chapter 7. They've heard of Daniel chapter 7. They've probably taught Daniel chapter 7. It's been a verse that's in their mind, right? The way I would know Luke, I am your father, multiply that by like 1,000. These people studied it. They knew it. The phrase son of man was etched and burned in their mind. And Jesus was standing on trial before them. But Peter was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and entered in and sat down with the officers to see the outcome. We're not going to talk much about Peter, but we kind of know what goes on with him in this scene. Verse 59 says, "Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus so that they might put him to death." So everybody in this room with Jesus would know Daniel 7. Everybody in this room with Jesus would know the phrase Son of Man and how that was used in the Old Testament. Now, they were studiers of the law. They knew the prophets, and they studied those things religiously. They knew it. But they were not good men. As a matter of fact, they were very dishonest men. They were not lovers of truth. They were seeking false testimony. Verse 6, he said they did not find any. Even though many false witnesses came forward, but later on, 2 came forward. And stated, "I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days." The high priest stood up and said to him, "Do you not answer? What is it that these men are testifying against you?" But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest said to him, "I adjure you," that is, like, I command you, I give you a royal law, "by the living God, that you tell us whether you are the Christ." Now here's this phrase, "the Son of God." See, Jesus throughout his ministry claimed to be the Son of Man, but he also claimed to be the Son of God. And that can mean different things to different people. Like, there's a sense in which everybody who's on this world can say that they're a son of God, right? That everybody is from God, is created by God. Without God, there's no you. Without God, there's no me. Without God, there's nothing. So there's a sense in which we're all sons of God, but Jesus didn't use the phrase in that way. There's another sense in which, in the New Testament age, we would say Christians are the sons of God, right? 1 John chapter 3 and verse 1 says, "Behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God." It's an amazing thing to be called a child of God. And those who are born of God can say that they're his children. It's a beautiful and wonderful thing. But once again, Jesus didn't use the phrase in that way. In John chapter 1 and verse 14, it says, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. The glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." When Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, he was claiming to be the Son of God in a way that's different then we could claim to be sons of God. I can say that I've been given life because of God. I could say I'm a child of God because I've been born into the family of God, the church. But I can't say, like Jesus said, that I came from God in the way that he came from God. See, when I think of being the son of something, I have a dad, an earthly dad, and he's a human being, and because he's a human being, you know for sure I came from him. I'm a human being as well. Well, when Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, he claimed to be the Son of divinity, the divine one. And in being the Son of divinity, of that which is divine, makes him the same. And when he claims that, Jews often wanted to kill him because of the exalted status that he, a man, a human that I see, is claiming to be from God. And so he's questioning Jesus. Like, do you claim that? Are you saying that you're the Christ? Are you saying that you are the Son of God? Now I want you to listen to Jesus' answer. Verse 64 says, Jesus said to him, "You have said it yourself." So basically, yeah, I'm that. I heard you say it. Yes, I am. But Jesus is going to go on. He says, "Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see," get this, "the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Does that conjure anything in your mind? Does that sound familiar at all to Daniel chapter 7? This chariot in the clouds that Daniel sees, that one comes and sits on besides God, called the Son of Man, or a Son of Man. And now he's saying, oh, that's me. Jesus says, I'm the Son of Man. I'm that. What do you mean that? That one who sits by God. That one who rules. That one who is given dominion over all the earth. That one that all tongues and nations and languages will bow before him and fall before him and honor and glorify him. That one who has a kingdom that will never end. The one who has dominion over all the face of the earth. Jesus says, that's me. The high priest tore his robe and said, he has blasphemed. What's Jesus claiming here? Is he the Son of God? Yeah. That's absolutely true. But when he claims to be the Son of Man, he's claiming that though he is a human, he's got this exalted status. See, it's important that we recognize that in our mind. It's important that we recognize, yes, he's God come to earth. But it's also important to notice that one who is human, who was made human, was God. And that's pivotal and crucial to our understanding of who he is. And it shows his exalted status. It shows who we should believe him to be. And the high priest was just furious about this. He said it's blasphemy. He's claiming deity. He's claiming to be God. He says, what further need do we have of witness? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. He speaks against God because he's making himself equal. What do you think? They answered, he deserves death. Then they spat on his face and beat him with their fists. And others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is the one who hit you? Guys, what I want you to recognize is we kind of bring this lesson to a conclusion as this. You know how the story goes. They ultimately ended up killing him. They hung him to a cross. And it was at that point, or soon after, that he ascended to the Father and sat on his throne as not only the Son of God, but the Son of Man, who has a kingdom, who reigns and rules and who has dominion. And our job is to know that about him, to proclaim that about him, to understand his power, to understand his authority, to understand his right and authority to rule, to submit ourselves to him and serve him with all of our hearts, with all that we have. He is the Son of God, and he is the Son of Man. He has a kingdom. He has power and authority. Let us be part of that kingdom. Submit to his authority and let him be our king, because unlike the kings of men, let's put it this way, the kings of men would never go to a cross for you. They would never go to the cross for their subjects. But your king did. He went to a cross and died for you and for me and for all the world. He's a king like no other. He is the Son of God, and he is the Son of Man. I thank you for your attention. I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope that I can at some point meet you in person. I thank you for allowing me to present this lesson to you and accommodating me in the ways that we're able to do this. I pray for you. I thank you for allowing me this opportunity. Love you and hope to see you at some point.